The alarms were already screaming when General Carex realized the human woman was still alive, conscious, and staring straight at him through the containment field as if she were not the most valuable prisoner ever taken by the Virex Dominion. That single moment should not have mattered. One human, wounded and captured during a routine planetary purge, should have been nothing more than a footnote in a campaign that had already spanned 3 centuries. Yet something in her eyes made the general pause, and in doing so, he unknowingly set the galaxy on a path it could never retreat from. Her name was Mara Ellison, and by every metric the Dominion used, she should have died hours earlier. When the Virex fleets descended on the outer human colony of Callisto Reach, the assault followed doctrine refined over 12,000 years. Orbital suppression crippled planetary defenses. Atmospheric denial shattered infrastructure. Ground forces deployed only after resistance was mathematically impossible. The Virex had erased hundreds of civilizations using this method. Humans were expected to collapse within hours. They did not. Even as fire rained from the sky, human command channels stayed active. Distress signals carried not pleas, but data. Enemy shield harmonics. Fleet movement predictions. Improvised countermeasures transmitted seconds before transmitters were destroyed. Mara Ellison had been one of those voices, relaying tactical updates from a collapsing bunker, while debris crushed her legs and fractured her ribs. When the structure finally gave way, she was still trying to reroute power to a dead console. Standard procedure dictated immediate execution. General Carex overruled it. He told himself it was for intelligence extraction, for psychological profiling, for strategic advantage. None of those explanations fully explained why he ordered medical stabilization instead of a plasma round. The truth was simpler and far more dangerous. The human had looked at his soldiers without fear. That unsettled him. She was transported aboard the Obsidian Mandate, Carex's flagship, a vessel whose hull was reforged from the remnants of conquered worlds. No human had ever been brought there alive. The ship itself was a monument to inevitability, to the belief that resistance was temporary and conquest eternal. Mara woke restrained inside a containment field calibrated for apex predators. Her body screamed with pain, her vision blurred, and her lungs burned with recycled air. She laughed anyway. It was raw and broken and brief, but it echoed through the chamber. "You really messed up," she said, her voice translated instantly by the field's neural interface. Carex stepped forward, his towering form blotting out the light. His species stood nearly 3 meters tall, armored in obsidian plates grown through controlled biological engineering. His eyes reflected her image across countless facets, each one calculating, assessing, dissecting. "Explain," he commanded. "You took a human alive," Mara replied. "That means you're curious. Curious empires lose wars." Carex should have killed her immediately. He felt the impulse rise, sharp and instinctive. Instead, something unfamiliar pressed against his restraint protocols. Amusement. "Your species is fragmented," he said coldly. "Emotion-driven. Short-lived. You will be studied, and your resistance will be rendered irrelevant." Mara shifted, biting back a groan as pain tore through her ribs. "That's what everyone says before we make their plans obsolete." He turned away, dismissing her words, yet ordered enhanced monitoring. Something about her defiance lodged in his mind, like a flaw in an otherwise perfect equation. Within the first cycle, anomalies appeared. Medical scans showed her injuries healing faster than projections allowed. Neural activity spiked during sleep, her brain replaying simulations of combat, adapting and refining responses. During interrogations, she answered selectively, never lying outright, but never revealing full truths either. Worse, she asked questions. About Virex history. About their wars. About why they feared unpredictability more than extinction. No prisoner had ever interrogated the Dominion. Carex found himself returning to the containment chamber more frequently than protocol required. He told himself it was observation, data collection, threat assessment. Yet when Mara spoke, he listened. "Why do you conquer?" she asked during one exchange. "To impose order," Carex replied. "Chaos destroys civilizations." Mara smiled faintly. "So does stagnation." The word lingered like a blade suspended in midair. The Virex Dominion had not changed in 12,000 years. Same hierarchy. Same doctrines. Same strategies. They believed adaptation was weakness, that deviation invited collapse. Humans, by contrast, seemed to thrive on instability. Their history was a record of near extinction survived through rebellion, innovation, and relentless experimentation. Carex did not realize it yet, but Mara Ellison was not just a prisoner. She was a variable. 3 cycles after her capture, a rebellion ignited in Sector 9. Not human. Virex. Junior commanders questioned orders. Supply lines faltered. Tactical rigidity failed against unexpected resistance. Dominion analysts blamed external interference. Carex knew better. Mara had sabotaged nothing. She had transmitted no messages. She had done something far more dangerous. She had talked. She spoke to guards about rebuilding cities after disasters. To engineers about solving problems without authorization. To medics about improvisation when resources ran out. She never encouraged rebellion directly. She simply told stories. Stories of a species that refused to accept inevitability. When Carex confronted her, fury vibrating through his armored plates, she met his gaze calmly. "You can't cage ideas," she said. "Trust me. People have tried. You are destabilizing my command," he roared. "No," Mara replied. "I'm showing them they already were." For the first time in his long career, doubt crept into Carex's calculations. He reviewed footage from Callisto Reach again. Civilians forming evacuation corridors under fire. Engineers converting mining equipment into weapons within hours. Soldiers fighting beyond tactical defeat to buy strangers time. Humans lost the battle. They denied the victory. When intelligence reported Earth mobilizing fleets faster than predicted, Carex understood the magnitude of his error. Human command was decentralized by design. Killing leaders did not cripple them. Capturing civilians did not break morale. It unified them. "You should let me go," Mara said quietly when he told her about the approaching fleets. "Why would I?" he demanded. "Because if you keep me," she said, "my people won't stop. If you kill me, they'll come harder. But if you let me walk away alive, you create something new." "Hope," Carex scoffed. "No," Mara replied. "Choice." Outside the viewport, stars shifted as the Obsidian Mandate altered course. Human fleets were closer than Dominion models allowed. They advanced without waiting for consensus, without perfect information, without fear of failure. Carex finally understood the truth the galaxy would one day teach. Humans did not advance because they were stronger or smarter. They advanced because when faced with the unknown, they moved toward it. Standing at the edge of a decision that could end his career or reshape history, General Carex faced a question no Virex leader had ever dared ask. What if conquest was not the only path to survival? And as you consider that, answer this. If capturing one human could change an empire, what would happen when humanity arrived in force? Because this was only the beginning. The decision was made without ceremony, without council approval, and without precedent, which was exactly why it terrified General Carex more than any human fleet ever could. He ordered the containment field lowered. The chamber's lights dimmed as energy levels dropped, and for the first time since her capture, Mara Ellison stood without invisible walls between herself and the most feared general in the Virex Dominion. She swayed slightly, muscles weak from confinement, but she did not step back. She did not bow. She simply met his gaze. Every instinct Carex possessed screamed that this was a mistake. Virex's doctrine taught that control must never be relinquished, not even symbolically. To lower the field was to acknowledge uncertainty, and uncertainty was the seed of collapse. Yet another voice, quiet but persistent, whispered that holding it would change nothing. "You are either very brave," Carex said, "or catastrophically foolish." Mara exhaled slowly, steadying herself. "Humans stopped seeing a difference a long time ago." He studied her closely now, not as a prisoner, but as a phenomenon. Her injuries were real. Her exhaustion was undeniable. Yet there was an intensity in her posture that defied her condition, as if she were drawing strength from the confrontation itself. "You believe your presence here has already altered my command," he said. "I know it has," Mara replied. "You wouldn't be standing here otherwise." Silence stretched between them, heavy and deliberate. Outside the chamber, the obsidian mandate continued its course, gliding through the void toward a rendezvous point that no longer existed. Human fleets had disrupted Dominion logistics across 3 sectors, not through brute force, but by exploiting assumptions the Virex had never questioned. Predictability had been their shield. Now it was a liability. Carex gestured toward a seating platform, a subtle invitation that no Virex prisoner had ever received. Mara hesitated only a moment before sitting, wincing as pain flared through her side. Carex noted it, filed it away, and wondered how many Virex soldiers would have shown such restraint. "You speak of choice," he said. "Explain." Mara leaned forward slightly. "Your empire believes there are only 2 outcomes: order or annihilation, obedience or chaos. But humans learned early that survival lives in the space between extremes. We don't choose between surrender and domination. We choose adaptation." Carex's mandibles tightened. "Adaptation requires instability." "Yes," Mara said softly. "And instability is not death. It's possibility." The concept was dangerous. Carex knew that. Entire civilizations had been erased because they embraced change too quickly, fractured by internal conflict. The Virex had risen precisely because they crushed deviation before it spread. Yet looking at the data scrolling across his internal display, he could not ignore the evidence. Human unpredictability was not random. It was intentional. Reports flowed in continuously. Human task forces abandoning conventional formations. Civilian vessels acting as decoys. Supply ships converted into mobile repair hubs mid-engagement. No central command. No singular doctrine. Just millions of individuals making decisions in real time, adjusting to failure instead of denying it. "You fight like chaos given purpose," Carex said. Mara smiled. "That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said about us." The smile unsettled him more than her defiance. It was not triumphant or mocking. It was honest. Pride without arrogance. Confidence without certainty. The kind of expression that came from a species accustomed to standing back up after falling. A chime echoed through the chamber, as an urgent transmission forced its way through priority channels. Carex did not need to read the details to know what it contained. The human advance had accelerated again. "They're not slowing down," he said. "No," Mara agreed. "They won't. Even knowing they face extinction? Especially because of it." Carex turned away, his massive form rigid with conflict. The Virex had always believed that fear of death was the ultimate motivator. Humans treated death as a variable, a risk to be managed, not an endpoint to be avoided at all costs. "You understand," Mara continued, "that capturing me didn't weaken humanity. It unified us. You gave us a face for the war. A reason that wasn't abstract." Carex understood that too well. The Dominion's greatest victories had come when their enemies lacked narrative, when resistance was scattered and hopeless. Humanity had narrative in abundance. Stories, symbols, martyrs, and now survivors. "What do you want?" he asked finally. Mara did not answer immediately. She looked around the chamber, at the architecture designed to intimidate, to reduce others to insignificance. Then she looked back at him. "I want you to stop pretending this ends the way you think it does," she said. "I want you to see what comes next before it's forced on you." "Which is?" "Contact," Mara said. "Real contact. Not conquest. Not surrender. Dialogue." Carex almost laughed. The idea was absurd. The Virex Dominion did not negotiate. It imposed. Yet the very fact that he was considering her words proved how deeply the situation had shifted. "Your leaders will never accept this," he said. "Neither will yours," Mara replied. "That's why it has to start here." Outside the viewport, distant stars flared as human drives bent space-time with crude but effective aggression. Their technology lacked elegance, but it compensated with redundancy, adaptability, and sheer stubborn persistence. "They will not stop," Carex said again, more quietly this time. "No," Mara said. "But they will listen, if you give them something they've never had from the Virex." "Which is?" "A reason to believe you're capable of change." Carex remained silent for a long moment. In his mind, doctrines warred with data. Tradition clashed with survival instinct. For the first time, the Dominion faced an enemy that could not be outweighted or outplanned. Humans learned too fast. Finally, he made a decision that would echo across generations. "You will be transferred," he said. "Not to an execution site. Not to a research facility." Mara's breath caught, just slightly. "You will be escorted to the edge of contested space," Carex continued. "And released." Her eyes widened. "You're letting me go." "I am creating a variable," he corrected. "What I can observe." Mara stood slowly, meeting his gaze once more. "You just changed everything." "Perhaps," Carex said. "Or perhaps I have merely delayed the inevitable." Mara shook her head. "That's the thing about humans. We don't believe in inevitable." As guards entered the chamber, not with weapons raised, but with cautious neutrality, Carex felt something shift within the Dominion's ancient certainty. The war was no longer a question of victory. It was a question of transformation. And somewhere beyond the stars, humanity was already adapting to the next phase. This was no longer a battle for territory. It was a test of whether the galaxy could change fast enough to survive humanity's refusal to give up. The transfer was conducted under silence, a rarity aboard any Dominion vessel. Mara was given minimal medical stabilization, enough to ensure survival but not comfort, and escorted through corridors that had once echoed only with the footsteps of conquerors. Now, those same halls felt uncertain, as if the ship itself sensed the fracture forming within its purpose. Crew members watched her pass. Some with curiosity. Some with something dangerously close to respect. None with the contempt she had expected. That, more than anything, told her she had succeeded. Carex observed the process from a command balcony, his thoughts tangled in projections and probabilities that refused to stabilize. Releasing a prisoner violated core statutes. Releasing a human prisoner bordered on heresy. Yet every predictive model that assumed continued escalation ended the same way. Dominion collapse. Not from defeat, but from irrelevance. Human fleets did not seek decisive engagements. They struck, withdrew, learned, returned altered. Each encounter made them harder to predict. Each loss refined their strategy. Where other species bled morale, humans bled information and converted it into adaptation. "General," an adjutant reported, voice carefully neutral. "Human transmissions have altered tone." Carex turned. "Explain." "They are no longer framing this conflict as a defensive war," the adjutant said. They are calling it an awakening. The word resonated uncomfortably. Mara was escorted to a small shuttle, its hull scarred and utilitarian, nothing like the imposing craft of the Dominion. It was almost insulting in its simplicity. Almost. You don't trust me to leave quietly, she said to the escort commander. We do not trust variables, the commander replied. Mara smiled. Then you're finally learning. As the shuttle disengaged, Carex watched its trajectory align toward human-controlled space. He felt no triumph, no relief, only the weight of consequence. For the first time in his life, he had acted without certainty. On Earth, the news broke before Mara's shuttle even crossed the boundary. Human networks lit up with her image, alive, unbroken, returning. Not rescued by force. Released by an enemy who had chosen, however briefly, not to dominate. The narrative exploded. Analysts argued. Politicians panicked. Military planners recalibrated. But among the civilians, among the millions watching from shelters and ships and half-rebuilt colonies, something else took root. Validation. Proof that resistance mattered. That words could destabilize empires as effectively as weapons. That survival was not just about firepower, but about refusing to conform to the expectations of those who believed themselves superior. Mara's shuttle crossed into friendly space under escort, greeted not by ceremony, but by silence. A silence filled with anticipation. When she finally spoke, broadcast across every channel that would carry her voice, she did not issue a rallying cry. She did not demand vengeance. She told the truth. They don't understand us, she said. Not because they're stupid, but because they've never had to change. We're not fighting to win territory. We're fighting to prove that adaptability is stronger than control. The message spread faster than any weapon. Within the Dominion, the effects were immediate. Junior officers questioned assumptions. Analysts flagged human behavioral models as incomplete. Philosophers, long sidelined by militarists, resurfaced with dangerous questions. What if rigidity was weakness? What if survival required evolution, not dominance? Carex felt the tremors of those questions ripple through command channels. He knew the High Conclave would not ignore this. He knew he would be summoned, judged, perhaps removed. Yet as he watched human fleets alter course, not toward Dominion space, but toward defensive consolidation, he understood something critical. Mara Ellison had not ended the war. She had changed its nature. The conflict was no longer about who would fall first. It was about who could change fast enough to avoid falling at all. And somewhere in the vast uncertainty ahead, the galaxy would be forced to decide whether humanity was an anomaly to be crushed, or a catalyst that could not be undone. For General Carex, that realization was more terrifying than any enemy. Because for the first time, the Dominion was no longer certain it deserved to survive unchanged. The stars outside the viewport seemed different now, less like trophies and more like questions waiting to be answered. Carex remained at his station long after the reports ended, aware that history had shifted while no one was looking. Humanity had not begged. Humanity had not broken. They had introduced doubt into an empire built on certainty, and doubt was contagious. The next phase would not be decided by fleets or firepower, but by whether the galaxy could accept change without tearing itself apart. And that was a war no doctrine had prepared them for. As alarms softened to background noise, and stars drifted by, one truth became impossible to deny. The human woman had been a single voice, but she carried the weight of an entire species behind her. The Dominion had wanted submission. What it received was transformation. And the galaxy would never return to the shape it had been before. Change had entered the equation, irreversible and alive, and every power watching the stars would soon understand that humanity was no longer asking for survival. It was redefining it. For all of them, forever. Without permission or apology. The summons arrived precisely when General Carex expected it, which somehow made it worse. The High Conclave did not issue demands. It issued inevitabilities. A directive encoded into the Dominion's deepest command layer activated across his neural interface, stripping his autonomous authority and binding his presence to the capital world of Virex Prime. There was no accusation in the signal. No condemnation. Just a single line that carried more weight than a declaration of war. Return. Account. Endure. As the Obsidian Mandate altered course, Carex stared into the void and wondered, not for the first time, whether endurance had finally become indistinguishable from stagnation. Virex Prime emerged from hyperspace like a monument to unchanging dominance. The planet's surface was layered with megastructures grown rather than built, dark spires interlocked with orbital rings that shimmered with defensive energy. Every design choice reflected the same philosophy: permanence through control. Nothing here adapted. It endured exactly as it had been engineered to endure. Carex felt suddenly alien within his own empire. The conclave chamber dwarfed even his imposing frame. 7 arch-strategists waited within, each suspended in biomechanical thrones that fed directly into Dominion data cores. Their combined consciousness processed war at a scale no individual mind could withstand. To them, generals were tools. Variables. Replaceable components in a vast equation. Carex of the 7th Armada! The conclave spoke, not in unison, but as a layered harmonic that vibrated through bone and thought alike. You have introduced instability. Carex lowered himself into the posture of submission required by protocol, though his mandibles remained unsealed, a subtle defiance he did not bother to mask. I introduced observation. Observation is complete, the conclave replied. Humanity remains hostile, expansionist, non-compliant. Yes, Carex said, and unchanged by force. A ripple passed through the conclave's shared cognition, a momentary disruption Carex felt rather than saw. Force has not yet been optimized. It never will be, he said. Not against them. Silence followed, heavy and calculating. Streams of data cascaded through the chamber, projections of human fleet movements, cultural transmissions, population resilience metrics. The conclave had seen all of it. That was what terrified Carex most. They saw the same truth he did, and still resisted it. You released a human asset, the conclave continued. That action violated Dominion continuity law. I am aware. You elevated a single organism above doctrine. I tested doctrine against reality. The harmonic deepened, sharpening. Doctrine is reality. Carex rose slowly, ignoring the surge of pain where neural inhibitors tightened. Then reality is failing. That, finally, provoked reaction. Energy fields flared. Conclave notes pulsed with increased intensity. To question doctrine was to question the foundation of the Dominion itself. Explain, the conclave demanded. Carex did. He spoke of human adaptation, of decentralized resilience, of a species that treated failure as information rather than shame. He described how every strike against humanity sharpened it, how every loss forged narrative cohesion instead of despair. He spoke of Mara Ellison not as a prisoner, but as a vector, a carrier of something far more dangerous than rebellion. Perspective. They do not seek to conquer us, Carex said. They seek to survive us. And in doing so, they change the environment of the galaxy itself. The conclave processed this, running probability trees that spanned centuries. When it responded, its tone had shifted, colder, more precise. Then humanity will be contained. By what means? Carex asked. By isolation, the conclave said. By saturation. By controlled extinction if required. Carex felt something fracture inside him. Not fear. Recognition. That will not work, he said. Your confidence is noted, the conclave replied. It is also irrelevant. Before Carex could respond, the chamber darkened as a new data stream forced itself into priority space. An unscheduled intrusion. Human origin. The conclave hesitated. That alone was unprecedented. A single transmission filled the chamber, stripped of encryption, broadcast openly across Dominion space. Mara Ellison's voice echoed through the vast hall, calm, measured, unafraid. This message is not a threat, she said. It's a question. How long can an empire survive without changing? Carex felt the impact ripple through the conclave's shared mind. Human audacity had reached into the heart of Dominion authority, not with weapons, but with words. We know you're listening, Mara continued. Because you always listen. You just don't respond. That's not strength. That's fear of uncertainty. Security systems screamed as countermeasures engaged, but the message continued, piggybacking on civilian relays, hijacking trade beacons, spreading faster than suppression algorithms could contain. You can kill us, Mara said. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But eventually, sure. The question is what happens to you afterward. Because a galaxy that learns adaptation from humans won't forget it when we're gone. The transmission ended. The silence that followed was absolute. For the first time in recorded history, the conclave had been addressed not as an authority, but as a participant in a conversation it did not control. This is your doing, the conclave said. Yes, Carex replied. And now it is yours. On the edges of Dominion space, the effects were already visible. Client species adjusted behaviors. Minor powers hesitated before compliance. Black market human philosophies circulated alongside stolen technology. The idea of adaptation spread like a mimetic contagion. The Dominion had always conquered territory. It had never needed to conquer ideas. Until now. Carex was stripped of fleet command before the session ended. His authority reduced, his future uncertain. Yet as he was escorted from the chamber, he did not feel defeated. He felt aligned. Elsewhere, human space pulsed with controlled chaos. Mara Ellison sat in a modest command room aboard a mobile habitat, surrounded not by generals, but by analysts, sociologists, engineers, and civilians. Humanity's response to the Dominion's escalation was not militarization alone, but integration. They were learning. Dominion reaction is fragmenting, an analyst reported. Increased internal debate. Slower response times. Mara nodded. They're not built for doubt. No, the analyst agreed. But they're learning it from us. Human fleets did not advance. They fortified, diversified, decentralized further. Colonies became self-sufficient nodes. Information flowed freely, unfiltered by hierarchy. The war effort became a collective act, not a commanded one. The Dominion responded with overwhelming force at the borders, but each strike met less resistance than they expected. Humans avoided decisive battles, absorbed losses, and reappeared elsewhere, altered. Every engagement taught them something new. Within the Dominion, fractures widened. Younger officers questioned orders. Strategists proposed radical revisions, only to be silenced. Yet the questions remained, whispered through neural back channels. What if control was the weakness? Carex, now relegated to an advisory role, watched these developments unfold with a strange sense of calm. He no longer believed survival lay in dominance. He believed it lay in transformation, painful and uncertain as it was. A junior strategist approached him one cycle, voice low. Is it true, they asked, that humans choose change even when it hurts? Yes, Carex said. Especially then. The strategist hesitated. And they survive? Carex looked out at the stars, at the shifting lines of a war that no longer followed predictable geometry. So far, he said, they always have. The Dominion prepared its largest offensive yet, a demonstration meant to restore certainty through overwhelming spectacle. Entire armadas aligned, weapons primed to erase human strongholds in a single coordinated strike. Carex knew it would fail. Not because the Dominion lacked power, but because power alone no longer decided the outcome. Mara felt it too, the tension before the next movement. Humanity stood at a threshold, not of victory, but of definition. They were no longer merely resisting extinction. They were teaching the galaxy a different way to exist. As fleets aligned and doctrines strained, one truth became unavoidable. This war would not be remembered for who fired the most weapons. It would be remembered for who changed first. And somewhere between fear and possibility, the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see whether the Dominion would break, bend, or finally learn to adapt. The next move would decide not just the fate of two civilizations, but the shape of survival itself. And no amount of control could stop what had already begun. The first shot of the Dominion's final offensive never landed, and that alone rewrote history. The armadas had aligned with mathematical perfection, billions of tons of living war steel poised to erase human space in a synchronized wave of annihilation. The calculations were flawless. The weapons were primed. The outcome, by every Dominion metric, was inevitable. Then the humans vanished. Not retreated. Not destroyed. Gone. Sensors flooded with noise as entire target clusters dissolved into empty coordinates. Colonies powered down to near zero signatures. Fleets fragmented into thousands of independent microgroups, slipping into folds of space the Dominion had deemed inefficient, illogical, unworthy of pursuit. Carex watched the data unravel in real time, his advisory console lighting up with cascading failures. Target locks expired. Firing solutions collapsed. Command hierarchies froze, waiting for confirmation that would never arrive. "They're refusing the battle," a strategist said, disbelief threading their voice. "No," Carex replied quietly. "They're changing the battlefield." Across human space, Mara Ellison felt the moment settle into her bones. This was the culmination of everything humanity had learned since first contact. Not confrontation. Not submission. Transformation. The Dominion fired anyway. Planet-cracking beams tore through empty orbits. Precision strikes obliterated abandoned infrastructure. Entire worlds burned, sterile and silent, their populations long evacuated into mobile habitats, hidden sanctuaries, and drifting networks that refused permanence. The galaxy watched in horror as the Dominion demonstrated its power against nothing, and in doing so, proved its weakness. The moment the last beam faded, humanity responded. Not with a counterattack, but with a broadcast. Mara's voice carried across every open channel, every neutral system, every listening outpost from the core to the fringe. She did not shout. She did not gloat. She spoke like a teacher addressing a class that had finally stopped interrupting. "You just spent the greatest concentration of force in your history," she said, "to destroy what no longer exists. That's what happens when you fight yesterday instead of tomorrow." Within the Dominion, panic rippled. Command nodes scrambled to regain coherence. The conclave reconvened in emergency session, their once harmonized cognition strained by competing interpretations. "This is deception," one arch-strategist insisted. "They will reappear." "They already have," another countered. "Everywhere. And nowhere." Humanity did not reemerge as fleets. It reemerged as presence. Trade routes reopened under new protocols. Independent stations broadcast offers of aid to former Dominion client species. Human engineers appeared in neutral systems, repairing infrastructure destroyed by earlier campaigns, asking nothing in return. Adaptation made visible. "You cannot bomb an idea," Mara continued. You can only decide whether you're part of it. The effect was immediate and irreversible. Client species began defecting openly, not to humanity, but to autonomy. They dismantled Dominion control structures and replaced them with cooperative networks inspired by human models. Some invited human advisors. Others simply copied what they had observed. The Dominion's borders stopped meaning anything. Carrick stood before the conclave one final time, not summoned, but invited. That distinction mattered more than any title he had lost. "You were right," the conclave admitted, their harmonic fractured but sincere. "Control is no longer sufficient." Carrick inclined his head. "It never was. It just took humanity to prove it." "What would you have us do?" the conclave asked. The question echoed across the chamber, across centuries of doctrine built on never asking it. "Change," Carrick said. "Not to become human, but to become adaptable." The conclave processed this, their vast intelligence wrestling with humility for the first time. Outside, Dominion fleets stood idle, weapons powered down not by order, but by uncertainty. Mara watched the same feeds from her station, understanding the danger of this moment. Empires did not collapse gracefully. They lashed out, fragmented, or calcified. "This is where it gets hard," an aide said beside her. Mara nodded. "This is where it always gets hard." She authorized the next phase. Humanity revealed itself again, this time deliberately. Mobile habitats converged into visible constellations. Fleets reassembled, not into armadas, but into open formations that broadcast intent rather than threat. Medical ships, agricultural modules, knowledge archives moved to the forefront. "We're not offering surrender," Mara said in her final broadcast. "We're offering participation." The Dominion responded not with weapons, but with silence. Long, agonizing silence as an ancient power confronted the reality that survival no longer meant dominance. Then, a signal. Limited. Unencrypted. Dialogue accepted. The galaxy exhaled. What followed was not peace, not immediately. There were skirmishes, rogue commanders, worlds that refused change. Adaptation was messy, painful, human. But the trajectory had shifted. Dominion fleets began reconfiguring, not for conquest, but for integration. Control nodes were repurposed into information exchanges. Younger generations within the Dominion embraced flexibility, learning from human chaos rather than fearing it. Carrick oversaw the transition, no longer as a general, but as a bridge. He worked with Mara, their conversations less like negotiations and more like shared problem-solving. "You could have crushed us," Mara said once, watching a joint task force stabilize a former war zone. "Yes," Carrick agreed. "And we would have died anyway." Time passed. The war faded into history, not marked by treaties, but by transformation. Humanity did not become rulers of the galaxy. It became something more dangerous and more enduring. A catalyst. Species learned to adapt not by copying human form or culture, but by embracing change as a survival strategy. Empires softened. Alliances fluidized. The galaxy became less orderly, more resilient. And humanity thrived within it. Years later, children across multiple species studied the conflict not as a war, but as a turning point. They learned how a single captured human woman had refused to be reduced, how an empire had been forced to confront its own rigidity, how survival had been redefined. Mara Ellison faded into anonymity by choice, her work done. Carrick retired to a quiet station on the fringe, watching stars that no longer felt like trophies or threats. They felt like possibilities. In the end, humanity had not won by strength alone. It had won by insisting that the galaxy grow up, that adaptability was not weakness, that change was not failure, that survival was not about standing unbroken, but about bending without snapping. And as the stars continued their endless motion, one truth remained etched into galactic memory. The moment the Dominion tried to destroy humanity, it taught the galaxy how to evolve. And nothing, ever again, would be the same.